It's International Water Day, and hi, I'm Beth McDougall, and I'm here today with the world's most interesting physicist, Nassim Haramein, and a biophysicist, William Brown, who works also with Nassim in their lab, Taurus Tech. And today we're going to talk about water. So, Nassim, one question that I want to ask you, because I think about it quite a bit, is we live on this water planet, 71% of the surface covered in water. We're over 60% water by weight, and by many people's estimation, 99% water by number of molecules. And water does some incredibly interesting things in our body. And I get this sense that it's allowed us to evolve here on the planet, and water's acting somewhat like an interface between our physiology, biology, and the unified field at large. Can you speak to that?
Well, Dr. Beth, is always great to see you and to be in your presence of mind, and William as well. I get to see you much more, William. So sorry, and Dr. Beth is much cuter than you, but
I don't know about that one.
but we I think so. This is the part where I get excited about water, because I see a direct relationship between the structure of space time that we are describing in the physics I'm writing right now and the structure of water. And, as like if water was like some conduit for information to self organize into biological structures. And, biology is not my field of expertise. And that's why I'm so grateful to be talking to you guys about this, because I see it from the quantum field perspective, like at the structure of space time, at the very fine level of space time. And I see the math of how it like transfers into the physical form of a water molecule, but then the mechanisms, from there, of course I understand some of the mechanism, but you guys have so much more of the details than I do about how that mechanism, transfer the information into like a antenna structure. We call the DNA and the RNA and all the rest of stuff. And the mitochondria. But what's really exciting in the last few weeks actually is that we solved these equations that says that space-time at the quantum level is acting like a resonant circuit,
Mm.
um, and it's oscillating, right? And it oscillates and it couples as it oscillates through the scales. And this coupling of these resonant circuit gives the correct answer for the masses, the radiuses, the forces, the scaling, and so on. But as well, we can apply it all the way to the molecular bonds and to the interaction of the molecules with each other.
Mm. So,
So,
so can you just say that in a different way? I think that's so important. So you were saying that this is moving up in scale, and there's the same kind of structure from the almost infinitely small moving on all the way up, and that resonance has some power.
right.
So,
Well, yeah, it's like literally inductive coupling
mhm.
across the scales. And like you can start all the way down at the Planck scale, which is like, for the listeners, it's hard to visualize what, because it's 10 to the minus 33 centimeter oscillation. So think of like a little wavelength or a little sphere or a little vortex of 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. I always give this example. If you grew that so it was a grain of sand, then the proton would have a diameter from the sun to Alpha Centauri, which is about
Yeah.
40 trillion kilometers, right? And the proton is small. So imagine this little oscillator is like super teeny, right? It's super small. And that's why we don't experience it directly. It's at a scale that we don't experience directly. But what we're finding is that that's the source of energy that couples across the scales to eventually give a proton, give an electron, give molecules. And the first molecules we find in these equations, of course, is the water molecule,
Mm.
right? So this is like a direct path, because a resonating circuit is like a little radio set, right? Transceiver.
Yes.
So it's like it's a direct path. Like the water structure is like the radio capting, or transferring the information of the fundamental field.
Yes. Right. And then water in the body is primarily existing in a structured state. Dr. Pollack has helped us understand that, as well as other scientists. And can you speak to the highly organized nature of space-time and how that's reflected in the highly organized nature of water in the body?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so you can see that they would be like very good coefficient of coupling,
Yeah.
right? Under certain circumstances, under certain geometry, the energy transfer, the information transfer would be really good. And then there would be ways in which it's not good. It's getting a lot of impedance, right? It's not, the transfer of information is not going through very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, maybe William can talk to that a little more, but I think that I believe we see that when cells become sick, is that the water structure kind of starts going amorphous. Or is that correct, William? I mean, Beth, you know that too, but
Yeah. I mean, I think that it takes energy to structure water, and we're so devitalized, generally speaking. We're not standing on the ground with bare feet. We're not sleeping on the ground anymore. We're not out in the elements and getting the infrared light to structure water in the body. And so, yeah, I think water, when it's highly organized as it should be in the body, it confers so much better health. Like, we're learning more and more about what structured water is doing in the body and how it's responsible for actually fueling a lot of the chemical reactions, perhaps fueling the movement of blood in the small capillary beds of the body. And now I'm just reading recently, really accentuating the effect of the mitochondria and the transfer of energy and information throughout the body. When water is in a structured state, we're more like a liquid crystal. And maybe you could speak to that, William, just some of the things that you're looking at right now with water in the body and how it's functioning.
Yeah, there's actually been a recent publication that I've just found totally fascinating. So these scientists, they had these crystals, like beryllium crystals, I believe, um, and within the crystalline lattice structure, there's water. So water is coordinated in the crystalline lattice, and they're doing these spectroscopic measurements of the state of the water. And what they're able to see is that because the water is under these confined conditions, coordinated within the crystalline lattice, the water is highly structured. So when they're measuring the state, what they're seeing is that the water, because it's under those conditions, it's in this superposition. So they were able to measure and record tunneling of the water molecules along this crystalline lattice,
quantum
uh,
tunneling.
quantum tunneling.
Can you say more about what that is, just so that everyone can understand what you're talking about?
Well, so it ties in exactly with what Nassim was describing with this coupling with that quantum field, that quantum structure of space at the smallest scale. So when molecules are in, you could think of it like an optimal coupling with that quantum field, which is kind of the base level of organization. It's the lowest level of entropy in the universe. So it's like a term I've heard it referred to, which I kind of like, is a holomorphic info entropy field. Because that's like the scientific way, that's what like physicists have used to say it is the morphogenic field. But so when molecules have this like optimal coupling, so there's like no impedance, the resonance is matched just right, they do interesting things like quantum tunnel, because the particular structure of space at this scale it's highly curved. It's a multiply connected space-time geometry. And what that means is that when something is strongly coupled to it, it doesn't really have to obey what we think of as the normal like rules of moving through space. It can kind of just, it can be what looks like in multiple places at once. If
Gosh.
it's jumping through this multiply connected space-time matrix. And so I mean, talk about like superconducting. A water molecule could be here at one end, and then nearly what looks like instantaneously be at the other, a different location.
And isn't that kind of what is happening in the microtubule structure in the body?
Exactly. That's exactly it. So that the same conditions that this water is in this crystal, it's a liquid crystalline structure, the water. That's the same conditions it's in the biological system, in our cells. And this has been measured. So me and Nassim actually met Dr. Anirban Bandyopadhyay at MIT. He had done direct measurements of a single brain microtubule. It has a what he called atomically ordered water structure in the center of the tubule. And he did direct measurements showing that when that atomically ordered, i.e. liquid crystalline water channel, when that water is removed from the microtubule, it no longer has this coherent superconducting signaling anymore.
Yeah, I think it's good to just even say what microtubules are. I mean, my understanding is that I've always thought of them as almost like the scaffolding of our cells. We just have, so many of them creating almost the tensile strength of our cells. And recently I learned that microtubules in one cell can actually traverse the cell membrane and go into neighboring cells. And then within those microtubules, you have this coherent water acting like a superconductor. And it's one of the ways that information is shared from cell to cell and just coordinates the body at large. So
aren't they as well luminescing? I mean, so
yes,
so the water is in a plasma, high energy plasma, like ionized state. Is that correct?
Yeah. There's a paper on the photoluminescence observed in microtubules, where under like a microscope, these guys were recording the photon emission, the luminescence from the microtubules.
So they act like a waveguide. It's coherent emission.
Yeah. So extremely highly coherent emission.
Wow.
It's biolasing.
woo! It's so exciting. And then you guys know a lot about the relationship between the microtubules and the mitochondria. Could you speak to that?
How many of these microtubules is there? That's really amazing, right? There's a lot, right? I think people should know that.
I mean, probably like hundreds and hundreds of trillions, because they make up the
The cell membrane,
matrix, the
right?
matrix of all of the cells, basically. You can
Mhm.
think about it like when you build a house, you've got your supports, beams, and girders, and everything that creates the structure of the house. So
Mhm.
imagine those are microtubules,
Mhm.
and then imagine if every house was connected with every other house, and sharing information that way. So
Yeah, and then they're lasing, talking to each other, right?
yeah,
And
that's, I mean, and photon emission is just, it's incredible.
Mhm.
So but then tell us about the mitochondria, for everyone out there, are the little energy factories within our cells. So they'll take oxygen that we breathe and glucose from the food we eat and run it through the electron transport chain to produce ATP, which is thought to be primarily the energy currency of the body. So they're very special, and there's millions of them per every single cell. And but how do they relate to the microtubules?
Well, me and Nassim actually have described in pretty good detail how the mitochondria are nearly always closely associated with the microtubule network. And this is actually called the mitochondrial reticular matrix. Just in that uh, inside the cell, you've got this vast interconnected network of the microtubules. And in nearly every instance, the mitochondria is uh, attached to the microtubules, and they'll form like helical filaments around the microtubules, and um, as well the cells will form gap junction connections, and even these what are called tunneling nanotubes, these long like real like uh, filaments that can be 100 micrometers long, almost twice as the length of the cell itself, where these microtubule mitochondrial extensions will connect two different cells, and they'll pass mitochondria between each other.
Wow.
So there's like a intracellular signaling connection.
Mhm.
Um, Now, there's a really important interplay association between the mitochondria and the microtubules, probably in coordinating information, because as well, the mitochondria is one of the largest sources of biophoton production
Yeah.
in the body.
Yep. And just to put it in perspective on water day, there's water inside the mitochondria, there's water inside the microtubules, outside the microtubules. And we're just learning that the structured water is actually playing a huge role with how these function. We've talked about just now how it's actually acting like a superconductor within the microtubules themselves. But talk a little bit about what it's doing within and outside of the mitochondria.
Yeah, so it gets really interesting in the mitochondria because so the mitochondria are a double membrane layered organelle structure. So it actually produces these multiple spaces where the highly ordered water can be kind of sequestered to do specialized functions. One of those, the inner membrane area, it's the mitochondria is performing subatomic physics where it's splitting apart molecules into electrons and protons.
Hmm.
And it's shuttling protons into one space. So you get this almost proton plasma.
as it's spinning, right? As it's
Right?
Uh,
These
uh,
rotary pumps that are how fast? How fast do they spin? Isn't it just like they're like little free energy devices, right?
yeah. So, it's creating this proton plasma, and along that inner membrane, you get superconducting electrons. So again, electrons that are traveling via essentially quantum tunneling. in the electron transport chain. And it goes to the ATP synthase, which is spinning at about 8,500 rotations per minute, RPM.
Per minute. Okay.
Yeah, well, but so a jet engine is like 10,000 RPM.
Okay.
So not too far off from a jet engine, so that's pretty interesting from like a biophysics perspective, that you've got this proton plasma that is spinning fairly fast, 8,500 RPM, to generate what are called the energy molecules, ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
And where is the energy coming from to spin those rotors?
Yeah, well, and so I mean, this whole complex is just rife with quantum mechanics stuff, so I mean,
Yeah, it's really remarkable that there's been a general attitude for so long that quantum mechanics was not involved at the biological scale because of the temperatures. But now this paradigm is breaking very rapidly as there's more and more independent research that is showing. I think there was papers published just last week showing clear evidence of quantum effects at that scale, right?
Clear empirical observations and measurements of quantum entanglement, quantum coherence. At this point, it's no longer in the speculative theoretical domain. I mean, these things have been observed, in rigorous, controlled, scientific tests and measurements. And then when you approach it from theory, it's actually what makes sense. You need this kind of phenomena to explain what's occurring, because when you're talking about the generation of ATP, its conventional description is off on what ATP is and what it's doing. It's generally thought of as like this energy molecule, but it's more of an information carrier, because when you look at how it's being generated at that ATP synthase in the mitochondria, you have a lot of entanglement going on. And for those who are maybe up on like quantum computing, entangling two different molecules, that's how you get a qubit. So what you're having is the production of qubits, quantum entangled bits at the ATP synthase. Now, this starts with the water. So you have highly structured water that's where these protons are coming from. And so you can have spin selective filtering. So the spin of those protons is very important in what is being selected to run this ATP motor synthase. Now, the importance of that is that the spin is what you entangle within quantum mechanical entanglement. So when it's producing these ATP molecules, they're entangled. Now, in the conventional idea, and that's being mediated or controlled by the water, how that spin entanglement is occurring.
That's been supported by experiments now. They're seeing the water modulating the interaction. And the other thing I wanted, just because viewers might be thinking, oh my God, what is he talking about? But I just want to say, because one thing is we have a tendency, you know, to isolate a system and try to analyze it. And William is doing a beautiful job in telling us about how this system is happening at this level. But I just want to say there's like billions of these little motors, right? Mitochondrial motors in each cell, right? That's correct, right? So
37 trillion cells. And so you've got this massive coherence happening.
yeah, it's crazy. I think you do this ATP thing about in a day about for your body weight. There's your body weight in ATP that's being done. And I think if you run a marathon, you do it for almost a ton of ATP.
Yeah. And we can't really explain where the energy for that is coming from with conventional science. You know, we can't eat enough food or breathe enough air to really be responsible for that much production of ATP. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those facts about human biology that just begs for, you know, thinking outside of the box.
Yeah. And for some quantum source of energy.
Yes.
Right. And because clearly it's there. It used to drive me crazy when I was talking to biophysicists and they were saying, but there's no quantum interaction at that scale. And I'd be like, but cells are made out of atoms, you know, you can't just separate that. And it's like, and so, yeah. And then to see the interaction of those organized system with the water, like clearly showing that the water molecule is the source, right? And then moving backwards all the way to the Planck field, like the interaction with the quantum field, and the information moving up the chain. And the exciting part is that we're now going to have the math to be able to calculate the energy transfer across this inductive, you know, relationship of these scales to end up at the energy levels that's occurring at the mitochondria. And when we did it for the other scales, we clearly see the source, the energy source, because if you have an oscillator, you got to have an energy source in the primary of that oscillator so that it, you know, that it's running. So we are calculating this right now, and it's really exciting. And some really pioneer work was done by I'm sorry, my computer is running out of energy. I need some quantum source of energy for my computer. But this
we'll cut that part, so you'll want to start that if you can. Okay. Pick up from where you left off before you got
yeah. So this source of energy, you know, we are seeing it coupling across the scales, and when you write the math, you can see, you know, like the transfer of the information. And there was work that was done by a brilliant physicist with the Nobel Prize, Brian Josephson, the Josephson junction. He's what he got his Nobel Prize for. And then he wrote papers after he got his Nobel Prize on the structure of water. He got in all sorts of trouble for doing that, because this is a few decades, like 2 decades ago, almost like 20 years ago, and or 15 years ago, and so on. And it was interesting because when you read the papers, they were very well written, and they were very strong arguments to show like a direct relationship between information theory and water structure and so on. And it was very positive. And then there's the work of Dr. Montagnier that showed clearly that you could inform water with electromagnetic fields, and that it could retain the information so that DNA could be reproduced in a water solution, and so on. So,
I know. And can you talk a little about, both of you, about specifically how water can store information in those coherent domains? My understanding, tell me if this is accurate, is that you've got oxygen that start to share the hydrogens with neighboring oxygens and almost form like a sphere or a ring. And there's within that a coherent domain that's like a pocket for holding data. Can you talk about, is that how you see it? And is that how you understand it?
Go for it, William.
Yeah, well, what gives water one of its, what makes it one of the most remarkable materials in the universe, what makes it the universal solvent and a information storage and transmission medium, comes down to its geometry.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that kind of fact is very interesting for us because that's kind of the same. What makes space a medium for the storage and transmission of information is this geometry, which is actually the same geometry as water, to a large extent.
Tetrahedral,
The
right?
tetrahedral geometry. It's really remarkable how so much of water's unique properties and abilities comes down to that tetrahedral geometry. What it does is that tetrahedral, so the way that those hydrogen atoms are connected to the central oxygen atom, H2O, is that there's a bend in how they connect. It's about 104.5 degree angle. And that is just crucially important because what it does is it forms a partial electronic dipole. Now, if those hydrogen atoms were just, protons, if those protons were just connected on that central oxygen in a linear arrangement, there would be no partial dipole.
Can you say what a partial dipole is?
Yeah, we're all actually really familiar with what a dipole is. If you have a magnet, that is automatically a dipole, a full dipole though, because it has a north and a south pole. Well, with molecules, you have that. You have a magnetic dipole because the proton is a spinning charge. So it has a magnetic, so are the electrons, spinning charge. So it has a north and a south pole. But then with molecules, you can have an electronic dipole where you have a positive charge and a negative charge. Now, some molecules have a full dipole where there's a full negative charge and a full positive charge, like a north and a south pole. And so what that does is that, if you have a negative charge and a positive charge, they're going to attract, or if you have two positive charges, they're going to repel. So, it strongly influences the interaction and behavior of molecules. Well, water doesn't have a full dipole, and that's good because that means that the ionic interactions aren't extremely strong. It has a partial dipole. So it has these kind of easygoing ionic interactions. But now if it was completely linear, there would be no electronic dipole, and it would have virtually no ionic interactions. You wouldn't have a thing called liquid water. The water would behave just like carbon dioxide, which is a linear molecule. And you have dry ice. When it melts, it doesn't go to a liquid, it goes straight to a gas. It's because there's no interaction between the different molecules. Water, though, because of that partial dipole moment, there's actually a fairly good interaction between different water molecules. Now, the point of all that is that it allows water to form molecular structure, like a crystalline, a liquid crystalline coordination. So it can become tetrahedrally coordinated where these partial dipole moments of the water molecules are lining up in an optimal configuration. And when that is long lasting, these structures are long lasting, we call that structured water. And as well, the way that they're interacting, as you had said, Beth, the protons, those hydrogens in these coherent domains where the water is structured and organized, they're delocalized.
Yeah.
The protons are no longer being held to any one oxygen molecule. They're just kind of sharing them. And what ends up happening is that those protons couple to the vacuum, the quantum field structure, and they quantum tunnel, and they're all entangled. And so, it's a macroscopic quantum structure, quantum entangled structure.
Yeah, and we could say, I mean, it's fair to say, since we see that this highly coordinated structure and highly structured water, is kind of critical to the water in the placenta of a woman, to the water inside the cell, and all this. We could say that this very specific, geometric interaction of the information transfer, you could think of it as like literally, quantas of information transferring across, inducting relationship, right? That this is critical to life. Without it, life doesn't exist. Like
Right.
life.
And I like to think about the blueprint or the morphogenic field of all things, including a specific one that's our own blueprint. And so the water's like an interface, right, of the information inherent in the quantum field into our body. Can you talk about how the water acts like an interface for that?
Yeah, I mean, it clearly, from the description that William was giving and you were, Beth, and from what I know about physics, especially of what we're writing right now in physics and what we're discovering, not just my team, but many other scientists around the world, is that we're starting to realize that basically, the water structure is like a bio oscillating conduit.
Yes.
Right.
That's great.
For information, and this is the information that structures the body, all the, because in standard theory there's no explanation how the system self-organized, meaning like how do cell know to like make a heart and a liver and a brain and there's actually no explanation in the standard model of biology to explain this.
Yeah, people say it's the DNA, but something has to tell, which genes to express, and there's a higher level of orchestration. And where is that? I sense it's a field, like an information field. You said a great term, William. What did you call that?
Well, the really sciencey way to say it, the holomorphic info entropy field, and that's the way that's the way physicists and scientists say the morphogenic field.
Okay, like it.
Right. And basically it's a transfer of information. The thing is, and that's just remarkable because it came out in the last 2 weeks in the physics we're writing. You cannot, and I make this really strong statement now, it will be in the paper I'm publishing in the next few months, but you cannot get the information field to cohere into these inductive relationship without an information field that's going in and an information field that's going out. You need both ways. So you have you have a
masculine and feminine. You have got the centripetal, centrifugal. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly, because you have a spinning field. And so the centrifugal, the field going out is electromagnetic. The field going in, you could think of as gravitational, or the force.
Strong force, like
That's keeping things together, that makes them cohere, and the two are exchanging, and that's where, like, all of a sudden you kind of get the path to expressing like how water bio oscillating crystal eventually produce what we call awareness or consciousness, because now you have feedback, right, of information. You have information going out and information going in, and so like some and that's required for self-organizing system, meaning a self-organizing system needs to know what its environment is so it can adjust, right, and then interpret that environment and feed it back, and then the environment feeds it back. And as soon as you have feedback, you have very high level of organization that can occur very, very quickly, which is required for biology to even exist, because based on random based on random interaction, you don't get a biological system. You don't even get one simple microbe. That wouldn't happen.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, just again to say 37 trillion cells, billions of reactions happening in every cell in a coordinated manner every second, there's definitely an orchestrating influence.
Yeah, and the orchestrating influence cannot be a linear, chemical change that is coming from like things bumping into each other from some like random way, and all of a sudden, it just happens to do the right thing. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't even happen at the speed of light, meaning is that true, William? If you calculate at the speed of light, the amount of exchange of information that's required doesn't add up, does it?
Yeah, no, and actually I think that there has been direct measurements of correlated activities, like in particular in different brain regions, that happen faster than like any chemical signal, any electrochemical signal could traverse. I mean, and it really, it was happening so fast that what it was strongly indicating was that there was some kind of non-local interaction, i.e. faster than light, kind of signaling an interaction. And that sounds like almost even crazy, but they're measuring it in the lab. Quantum tunneling, quantum entanglement. Those are all non-local.
Every time you say quantum tunneling, I think about a wormhole. Is that kind of what it's like?
Well, you're right on. It is. Okay. It is. Well, because because in normal, in conventional quantum mechanics, like the Copenhagen interpretation, you just ignore the mechanism behind quantum tunneling. You see it and observe it, but you don't say how it's happening.
Right.
But
it's like the electron is in this orbital. Oops, it's in this one. And they say, it's quantum tunneling. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're actually interested in what is the physical mechanism of what's happening, it's the space-time geometry. It's the at that Planck scale where Nassim is writing the physics, and what he's shown is it's a wormhole network, a micro wormhole network. And so these things are physically traveling from point A to point B, but they're going through the highly curved, multiply connected geometry of space-time. So what we see is particle A that's here, and all of a sudden it's here at location B, and when that's happening in the biological system, you get interesting things like 100% efficient energy harvesting, and ultra fast, ultra high fidelity signaling. And that's how you begin to orchestrate and coordinate 37 trillion cells having hundreds, billions of reactions per second.
Yeah, that's the only way to explain it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And water is kind of the king of that interaction. You know, I mean, not only is
Or
it
the queen.
I'm sorry, the queen.
Let's be respectful here.
Well, as the mother, that's probably actually more appropriate to say,
Yeah.
the queen as the mother of life, right? So you know, it's forming these coherent domains with uh, ultra high level of strong coherence or quantum coherence, entanglement, quantum tunneling. And, you know, for molecules in the cell to form, you know, their three-dimensional configuration is what gives them function. That formation of all the little motors and proteins and enzymes in the cell that are doing all the work, that form comes from the water. The
Yep.
water 100% determines how the proteins are going to come together, how the DNA is going to come together,
Yeah.
and more importantly, the uh, information exchange, how the protein is going to interact with the DNA.
Yes, for 1 second, I want to pause you because I think it's really important for everyone to understand that the reason why we're 99%, you know, water by number of molecules is that water is everywhere. Like it's in between all the larger molecules, and like the molecules have these spaces, and there's little tiny water molecules within them all over and wrapping around them in sheaths and ranging around and spiraling, you know, arrays. And so there's not a place in the body where water isn't really. And so, okay, so talk a little bit about how the water's influencing the way the proteins are functioning. And I'm really interested for us to talk about how water is influencing what genes are being expressed at any given moment.
Yeah, so virtually every protein to protein interaction, protein to DNA interaction, and what that's really that's the activity of the cell. That's mostly what's happening is proteins interacting with each other to do enzymatic reactions. They run the biochemical networks of the cell to make metabolism, to replicate the DNA, to read the DNA. It's all protein to protein interactions, DNA to protein interactions, and RNA. And every one of those interactions, the intermediary is water.
Yeah.
Virtually no two molecules in the cell like directly uh, um, linked together um, in these kind of signaling interactions. You do have protein to protein bonds that form, but those are pretty permanent. In a large class of interactions, you have this highly structured water that is mediating the signaling between these systems. And in fact, this kind of mediation in biophysics, it can almost be analogous to when two electrons interact. They exchange a photon. They interact via the quantum field with the exchange of this photon. At kind of like a scale level up, two proteins interacting, the quantum field for them is the water, and they exchange and interact via the water.
Right. And doesn't the water actually, when it's in its structured form, provide a little bit of energy for the configuration change of a protein in order for it to do its work, you know, to almost fuel that interaction?
Yeah. Well, the thermodynamics associated with these kind of configuration changes in the protein and how it interacts with other proteins in the cell, that's entirely determined by its interaction with the surrounding highly coherent liquid crystalline water structure. it's regulating all of that. And so this is where like Montagnier and Gerald Pollack's work is so important, so interesting, because so you can see that the structured water is telling all the molecules in the cell how to come together, how to interact. It's regulating the protein interaction with the DNA, which is determining which genes are being read. In fact, it's what enables the like transcription factors and the polymerases to read the DNA. They read it through the water superstructure over the DNA.
Wow.
Now, it's tempting to think that, okay, so the water is being formed into these highly structured phases by the molecules. But what Montagnier and Pollack are showing, or have shown, I should say, is that actually the highly structured water, in a sense, comes first.
Wow.
And then you get the molecule structures that form. So, Gerald Pollack, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that the water is coding the blueprint information or the morphogenic field information of that molecule, and that's what then allows that molecule to form?
Well, yeah, that's a really interesting question, because the information for the molecule, its blueprint, so to speak, is in that morphogenic field. And so the water is really acting as the template that allows that structure to form.
The conduit.
The conduit.
Yeah, that's why that all life emerged from water. You can't treat water as just a passive, non-meaningful medium that you're just studying the biology in, which has been the case for so long. Now we're discovering, oh wait, it's not just like a background medium we can ignore. It's the source. Of course, it's the source, since all life emerged from it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
then,
you've mentioned before a little bit about the DNA and what like genes are being triggered to be expressed, being kind of influenced by the water. Can you say more about that as well, Nassim?
Yeah, well, yeah, I tend to, that's more of a William mechanism question, because he's definitely more trained on this than I am. But from my part, it is trying to explain, because William was talking about quantum tunneling and how quantum tunneling is not really defined clearly, or even entanglement in quantum theory. It's just a constant, it's like a consequence of the theory, and it's measured in laboratory, but it's unclear what's producing this mechanically. And then to say it's wormholes is good is a step forward to realizing, oh, space-time is highly curved in every point, meaning that it's highly warped in every point, and that's why information is moving through. But then even, to like dig into that mechanism, which we've done, just maybe to help people understand better. So there's a problem in physics that has to do with hyperplanckian effects at the horizon of a black hole, or subplanckian effects, meaning that the way Hawking described, black hole entropy and the interaction of virtual particle near the surface of a black hole produces a problem where you would, like the math expressed, that they would be subplanckian. They would be something even smaller and more energetic than Planck's happening. And so,
I get it. It's not going to just end at the Planck.
Right, exactly. The universe is not going to say, oh, I'm not doing anything.
This is the smallest thing I do.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, but there's no mechanism in the standard model to go and calculate this. But we, from our scaling equations, we are able to calculate that, and so we were able to calculate what the Planckian field looks like, and of course, you know, it has a different speed. So like, just to get a sense for people, the speed of light is really fast, right? It's like 300,000 kilometers per second. You know, it's fast. You know, think of going 300,000 kilometers. I think it's 186,000 miles, you know, like in a second, right? So like in a second you're here, and you know, you're driving your car, and then the next second you're 186,000 miles, you know, down the road. That's pretty quick, right? So, but that's because we're thinking about it like in our
scale.
yeah, but but think of it in the universe. The speed of light is really slow, right? It takes thousands, billions of years for a photon to leave one side of the universe and then end up on the other side. Like, it's really, really slow. It's like billions and billions of years. So it's and think of it for the little molecules of your body, that there's 100 trillion or 30 or 40 trillions of them. It's got to traverse, and it's got a little signal over here that it's got to send on the other side of the body. And it's like, oh my God, at the speed of light, it's just too slow, right?
Yeah.
So we see this quantum tunneling, we see this entanglement. And what's really cool now is that these equations we wrote, and if they're correct, and they seem to be correct because they output all the constants very precisely and all the radiuses and everything. Well, then the information, when we see it as instantaneously, it's because the information is being transferred at the sub-Planckian level, and at that level the speed is 10 to the 40th time faster than the speed of light.
Wow.
So
so it's almost like if it goes in a wormhole, that's how fast it's going to go.
That's right. So now we have the mechanics and we have the calculation to know the speed. It's like, think of it as the refreshing speed of the universe, the thought refreshing speed of the universe. That's how fast the universe is transferring the information across all the nodes. And that's like 10 to the minus 27 seconds to cross the universe at that speed, something like that, right? So it's like it's updating the information across all the nodes at super speed. And our network system, our brain, our body, everything is part of this updating.
And when you think about everything repeats on every scale, and as above, so below, so obviously we have a network within our bodies that's going to transfer at that same speed as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think just recently they found, we've been, all of us in our presentation, we've always showed relationship between the neural network we see in a human and large structures in the universe, like superclusters that have these filaments, and they just look just like brain structure. Well, and then all the way down to the Planck, when we do the math for the Planck field, we see this same type of like interaction field of a neural network, but that is being confirmed mathematically now. So there's literally an analog between your brain and super large, clusters of galaxies in the universe.
And I think the microtubule network within the cells probably would be a fractal of that as well. And there you have the water within there acting as a superconductor of information.
Exactly. Yeah.
So cool. Zooming out a little bit, I think that acupuncture meridians in the body involve structured water in a coherent state, acting almost like a laser as well. Have you read about that, or can you speak to that?
William?
There has been, again, published studies showing that the acupuncture meridian system does have a physiological correlate in that you can map those points to the connective tissue network. In particular,
Fascia and
yeah. Well, in particular, the collagen fibrils.
mm,
So the connective tissue network is the largest organ in the body because
mhm.
it is a continuous system that connects every tissue in the body. And in fact, blood can be thought of as the liquid phase of the connective tissue network. Um, so that's one of the reasons why, if you're working on this system as you do in acupuncture, you're affecting the whole body. And you can change the energy dynamic, the energy flow at one point, and affect a different location of the body through that point because it's in this connective tissue network. Now the thing is, with these collagen fibrils, it's part of what's called the extracellular matrix. And the extracellular matrix is again this kind of like fractal scaffolding connection of
Mhm.
these molecules that are extremely hydrophilic.
That's right.
Yeah,
Glycosaminoglycans and
yeah,
that have
yeah,
just numerous binding sites for water.
yeah. The proteoglycans, the
Hmm.
glucosaminoglycans,
Hmm.
collagen fibrils, the fibronectin,
Hmm.
they love water. Water loves them.
Yeah.
The union made in heaven. And uh, so what you get is along these collagen fibrils, uh, this highly structured water
Mhm.
that forms a channel, and you can have that proton tunneling
Mm.
along that entangled, quantum entangled water uh, conduit, water collagen conduit. So, the movement of energy along the meridian system is probably the ultra fast or basically superluminal information exchange of this proton tunneling network, occurring at probably what Nassim's calculations showed, 10 to the 40th times the speed of light. Um, and so, and then, where you have impedances in that information flow, that is probably destructured water,
Mm.
damage to the underlying connective tissue network, the destructured water, that's where you start to get disease states of the
Yes.
body where it starts to uncouple from that morphogenic field,
Yeah.
and it's not really sure how to orchestrate things anymore, and it kind of starts falling apart. And so if you can restore that information exchange, you can couple the body, the tissue back to that morphogenic field, get that optimal information exchange and signaling occurring again, and
Mhm.
restore health.
Right
That's
on.
through the water.
Yeah, that's right. That's so cool. So when you think about the water everywhere in the body existing in this highly coherent, organized state, our body is functioning much like a liquid crystal. And is there anything that we can do to enhance the functionality of our bodies by like, is there anything we can do with our thoughts, with our emotional vibration, with our lifestyle that's going to enhance our ability to function as a liquid crystal?
Well, you're such a good example of that, Beth. And, this is definitely what you do every day, right? You help people tune their liquid crystal into a higher state of coherency, right? Using all kinds of modalities. It's remarkable, and you're excellent at it. But I think that, yeah, I mean, I think the first step is to realize, and that's what we've been talking about, is that liquid water that we see is just a scale up from a liquid space that we live in, right? So the quantum field acts like it appears to be a non-Newtonian liquid type of structure, right? Superfluid, but at the same time, if you put a lot of energy in it, it can become really rigid. And and it so to think we're kind of like we're made, it's not just outside of us. When we talk about a field, we have a tendency to think of something outside of us, right? So it's like, but we're made out of that because the atoms are mostly space, and so we're made out of that field, and so we emerge from that field, and throughout the years, I mean, we literally emerge from water in the in the placenta of a woman, and then we come out, and throughout the years, it's like our water gets a little polluted, and there's all kinds of things that happens to us that may impede the information transfer in the body. And so that thing starts to not communicate very well. I'm just doing this in a very general way, and so there's so many different modalities in which you can bring that back into coherency. You have to first identify the problem, but then when you have it, then you can. But it has to do with not only what you're eating and what you're, how much you're sleeping and all the stuff you do in a day, but as well with how and what information you're giving your body from your consciousness. Because if consciousness is this feedback of information with the field, well, then that's going to drive how the chemical things in your body are occurring, if they're occurring based on this information transfer, right?
Right. Can you speak to how water and consciousness interact?
Right. Well, so clearly, you've got hydrogen, which is like the foundation of creation in there, right? It's like, the universe is mostly made out of that stuff. And the way we developed material theory, it kind of was backward, because we first developed stuff, or we first identified stuff that is common to us. So we said there's like 3 states of matter, right? There's solid, and there's liquid, and then there's gas. Those were like the first obvious one we discovered. And then we discovered a 4th one that we called plasma. And so the tendency is to think, oh yeah, the plasma is this kind of weird stuff,
that should be the first state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, there's not really any other states. Meaning that, I mean, there is other states, but what I mean is that there's not really any other thing than plasma. Everything else is just plasma that's cooled down. The universe is 99.9% plasma, right? And so basically, so you can think of it as this the water structure as being like, the plasma that's cooled down, right? Like the energy of the hydrogen information flow through this fundamental field, like that's emerging, and then that's coupling, with oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it can scale to the next level, right? So it's building the scaffolding, the geometry for the next level. And as it does that, it organizes, it structures, and the result is that, then it transfers information to the next scale, which will be, the molecules of like the proteins and all the different parts, the different molecules, and the information is being transferred through these, energy exchange, right? This electromagnetic energy exchange. And so then you start to think of yourself as an electromagnetic transfer of information from the Planck field, like a Planck plasma that's transferring information throughout the scales. And then the next thing you know, you got basically a bag of water that's moving around.
Yeah. Yep.
it's,
Yep.
it's gathered like little minerals and stuff, and it just stuck them together, and now it's able to move around, right?
Right.
And because this bag of water is transferring a lot of information through it back and forth, it becomes self-aware. And, right? Because self-aware is feedback that you are aware of you. And then and the danger there is when you become self-aware, you can think you're separate from that field. You can think somehow that you're not connected to that whole thing.
And the ego just loves that.
Yes. And now you lost the source of your existence. So water has a really deep meaning in our evolution.
Sure does. Yeah. Do you have anything to say about that, William?
Yeah. And we've even been describing how the structure of water, in particular in the body, having this highly coherent structure that's coordinating and orchestrating all molecular and cellular and tissue activities. Well, you start to run into problems when that water starts to decohere, starts to uncouple from that field, that morphogenic field, that universal field of information, the unified space memory network. Well, our thoughts and our emotions have energetic physiological correlates.
That's right.
So when you're having like thoughts and emotional states that are very decoherent, very, disharmonious, that's going to be reflected in the water structure.
Absolutely.
It's kind of reminiscent of like Dr. Emoto's work, where, he was showing that by like focusing on the energy of love, water crystallizes in these beautiful patterns. But like if you play it heavy metal music, it decoheres, well, so you can think of that as occurring like in your body, so like centering techniques, consciousness techniques, meditative techniques, awareness, meditation, even yoga and acupuncture, Ayurvedic food, drinking clean, structured water. We have some technologies for that. These are all things that are going to help to structure the intercellular water in the body and optimize that coupling to that morphogenic field. So you're optimizing health, and you're tuning into greater levels of awareness. You're able to, your biocrystalline oscillator is able to operate at a higher frequency.
Yeah.
So that's like expanded awareness, expanded consciousness. And a lot of that comes down to thoughts and feelings. What kind of internal state, what kind of internal alchemy are we working with?
Yeah, I think about the work of Dr. David Hawkins, talking about the vibratory rate of different emotional states, kind of rating them on a logarithmic scale. And the vibration of love and peace is, up there in the 500s and 600s, whereas anger, the kind of coarse, slower vibration of anger, is down in the 200 something. And I think that higher vibration just allows for greater information exchange with the field, greater input of that organizing influence, and that, and also a greater bandwidth of information that we can receive.
And we usually try to think of emotions and thoughts as like subjective qualia, that things that don't really exist or have real physical correlates. But the science is saying that that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you look at the Penrose Hameroff mechanism, uh, so that's the physicist Sir Roger Penrose and the quantum biologist Stuart Hameroff. You know, they're describing how emotions and thoughts have real physical correlates to the coherence or entanglement state of the microtubule, the mitochondria, and even deeper than that, correlates to like coherent or decoherent structures in space-time geometry.
Oh.
You know, so I mean, like emotions and thoughts, they're not just subjective qualia; they have real objective physical correlates. You know, so
Do you mean like physical locations in the brain? Like you have like certain neurons that are firing, you know, in a coordinated manner with particular emotion set, like emotions? Is that what you mean?
well, there's that, but then there's also what it translates to at the cellular level in terms of that information exchange. You know, so this is important because you know the thoughts and emotions, they're not just neurons firing. You know, the thoughts and emotions are a body-wide information exchange that's
Like the
occurring.
molecules of like the neurotransmitters and the hormones that are released and the
Well,
vibratory signature of all those things collectively.
even the vibratory state of the mitochondria in your skeletal muscle, in your heart, in your intestinal system, all of it is involved in the thinking and emotional process. You know, so it's like,
Okay, this
yeah,
is
yeah.
fascinating.
And so if the information exchange that's occurring is one that's disharmonious, you know, in a discordant way, it's going to throw off that resonance, that oscillation in the entire body. You know, and so you can feel it because if you know you're depressed or something bad happens or you're thinking bad thoughts, you know, you feel sluggish. Your energy goes away, right? That's not just a subjective emotional state. That's a physical state. Your entire body is responding to that, and it's being reflected physiologically in the activity of the mitochondria of every cell in the body, in the information exchange in every microtubule in the body, and you know, like what Hameroff and Penrose have described in the space-time geometry of the body. It's more decoherent. It's not coupled optimally. It's not forming those optimal coherent structures that have the greatest resonance information exchange. You know, the higher that oscillatory frequency,
Yes.
like the better the coupling.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
And then all of it gets encoded in the water, like a homeopathic imprint in the water itself.
yeah,
You know, if you're constantly thinking thoughts of a negative nature, you're going to be imprinting that in the water of your body.
exactly.
So important.
Yeah, and the contrary, you know.
Right.
Yeah, which is remarkable. So basically, you can think of it as you know, what signal are you wanting to send? Because we're saying this entanglement we can see at at the biological level, but we're saying this entanglement actually, you know, through the water molecule cascade down all the way to the Planck field. And remember, I was saying there's information going one way, there's information going the other way as well. So what are you feeding the Planck field, right? What are you giving to the entangled network of the universe? Your thoughts? I mean, you could push the analogy to its bleeding edge and say, well, your thoughts are informing the universal thoughts.
Yep.
And so it has very fundamental, impact on the morphogenetic field, not only to your local environment, but to your non-local environment, to the
Right.
morphogenetic field of the whole planet, of the whole solar system, if you'd like, and so
Mhm.
on. And I'd like to even suggest that it is it goes beyond that. You can actually write these scaling laws, these scaling energy interactions, so that you understand, like, as you become more and more of a bio oscillating antenna that's really reaching high level of frequency and energy, that you have a larger and larger impact on the morphogenetic field of the system. Like maybe you'll have a larger impact on the morphogenetic field of the planet, and then eventually of the solar system, and eventually on the galaxy, and eventually, and so on,
Yeah.
as you become a better conduit for the structure of space-time. There was an experiment that was started a few decades ago. I think it was started at Princeton. Well, is that correct, William?
Yeah, yeah, because Princeton had the whole division involved with consciousness studies. Yeah.
Right, consciousness studies, where they put eggs all around the world. Eggs are random generator computers, and they were wanting to see if they network these computers around the world, if they would see spikes or times where there was more coherent behaviors of the random generator, which should not occur if they're completely random. Um, and they right away start to see spikes. They right away start to see patterns in like very specific moments where the random generator would start outputting coherent relationships in the network. And they couldn't figure out what was causing this. And I think it's accurate to say that some people realized at the time, this was in the 90s, it was, at the beginning of internet, and one of the things that were starting to be popular at the time is coordinated global meditation that were occurring. And I think they correlated those spikes to the global meditation that were occurring, and then clearly coordinated the spikes to what happened at 9/11.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that really kind of sealed the deal. That's when the project went to Stanford. I think they shipped it to the West Coast because it was a little too esoteric. I don't know, but basically showing direct correlation between the state of emotions of the global community, and how, you think about it, like how it's affecting computers. It's affecting, but think about it, like the computer is running a little crystal oscillator,
Mhm.
a little crystal chip on the board, and that chip is subject to quantum interaction and quantum effects. And if the information field is happening at that level, then it's conceivable that, yeah, you can affect a computer with your thoughts. I mean, I love this example, like when I love my cars, they seem to run better. Right? It's
True.
like, right.
And I do believe that as we become more informed, that does enhance the consciousness. Like when you start hearing Nassim and William speak, you realize, like, wow, we can think outside of the box. We can, we are so much more than we thought we were. We're 99.99999% more than we've been taught, in the current paradigm. So it just opens up worlds of possibility. And It's really about the expansion of consciousness. We're just riding the beginning of a wave. There's a tidal wave coming, of just, we're shattering the old paradigm, and the new paradigm is coming in, and it's just going to inform how we think about ourselves and how we think about the universe. It's going to inform our understanding about, like Nassim's always been saying, that we are all one thing. We are all different manifestations of this one thing. And when you really grok that, it changes everything. I'm going to say one more thing about, like, Nassim, is going to be publishing a paper soon, and I'm just looking forward to it so much. And I really feel there's going to be the pre-Nassim paper on planet Earth and the post-Nassim paper on planet Earth, because it's going to change everything we know about the nature of reality, the structure of the universe, and it will be, in certain respects, formulaic. We're going to understand in a very concrete way how to interact with the forces of nature. It's going to change everything. So stay tuned for the most exciting time in history coming soon.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's changing me as I'm writing it. It's remarkable. Yeah. It's remarkable the change I feel in my body, in my consciousness and everything as I'm writing this paper. I literally feel like I'm growing, in wisdom and awareness and self-awareness and all this as I'm writing this paper, because the math and what it says is so fundamental. I can feel it in my body as it comes out, with the accuracy of all and the relationship of all the constants, and it's just one light after the other that's lighting up, and clarifying the structure of creation and how beautiful it is and how miraculous it is, mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful to be able to be a conduit for this, with the help of all you guys. It's remarkable, and I'm so excited to bring in the world, because as well it gives a direct path to engineering as well, to engineering mm-hmm. amazing technologies that can come out of it and transform humanity. So,
and as Nikola Tesla said, the moment that we begin to study the energetic nature of reality, I don't know exactly what his quote was, but we'll make more progress in 1 decade than in all of history combined. And that we're right now, right at that point.
Right at that. Well, people are getting a little irate with me because I've been saying in the next few months for a year, but now really in the next 2 months, we will be ready. I was missing a few really important points that I felt like I didn't want to put it out without that in it. And I needed, even personally, to understand deeper. And we resolved this in the last few weeks. And so now we're like full all week this week. I'm clustered in my cave with Olivier Alérol, Dr. Olivier Alérol, a physicist from France that works with us, and we're, redacting the paper, and so now it's very, very close. It's so solid, and it's so precise. It outputs all the constants in physics with 12-digit accuracy. We have exactitude meaning it's all the solutions are analytical, meaning that there is no free parameters, or it's not like a computational equation, meaning it's not a numerical solution, meaning it has an analytical based on first principle approach. And there's nowhere in the whole thing, and we're talking thousands of equations, where it is not analytical. So now we have all the mechanism, and we have the relationship. And it all, it all condenses to this one thing, is that the universe doesn't do math. It doesn't do physics. The universe does relationships, ratios, the relationship of things. And if you figure out the pattern of these relationships, then the whole thing just unfolds and you see why this constant appears there and why this force appears there and why this happens and this happens, because it's the relationship of the information flow. And it's remarkable.
Thank you so much, Nassim and William. This has been such an exciting time talking about water in this way, of how it's acting like an interface and a conduit, this amplifying substance that's allowing us to function and emerge out of the field and function as a coordinated, coherent being. So this is just such a pleasure. You guys bring so much life to this topic, and I'm so grateful to know both of you and get to riff on it with you. So
Thank
fun.
you, Beth. It's so great to be talking with you as well. And William, thank you for so much of the dedication you both have to making to advancing this field of knowledge. And I think we're really at the cusp of something remarkable, and I'm really grateful to be part of contributing to this amazing team. And I look forward to the next discussions we have, because we have lots more
to talk about. All right. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.